Joining me on this edition of Broadband Action, a couple of people that are directly interfacing with broadband operators that are working on BEAD projects. And so we're going to be talking about some of the challenges that operators that with BEAD projects are going to be facing over the next few years, as well as anybody else who's building in the broadband industry. We know that's a whole lot of people. So first of all, Ashley is with KPG. So Ashley Travers, tell everybody about yourself.
Thank you, Curtis, and thanks for having me here today. Happy to be here. Yes, I'm with KGPCo. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships. So I essentially have started, and I will end with BEAD. I was brought on to help craft the strategy, our go-to-market strategy and implementation for BEAD, and also on the board of directors for the Fiber Broadband Association.
Fantastic. And Lori Adams, Lori, I was trying to think if I've had you on a podcast before. I don't know that I have, but tell everybody who you are.
Is that possible?
Maybe we've been on one, but not yours. I'm not entirely sure. I'm Lori Adams. I'm the Vice President of Broadband Policy and Funding Strategy for Nokia. I've been in the U.S. broadband space for 25 years and with Nokia for 4.5, focusing on anything relating to government funding programs and generally market development for the North America broadband space.
Fantastic. Well, again, thank you both for coming on. We appreciate it, sharing your wisdom and knowledge and experience in the industry with everybody that's watching or listening. So BEAD's going to affect the world that we all live in a few different ways. So we're going to tackle each of the main points of potential contention. And I'm going to start with the impacts of current issues with labor shortages. What's causing it, and what are we going to do about it? And either one of you can pipe in.
I'll jump in on that. I know when I was at Fiber Connect just a few weeks ago, one of our partners that in the construction business was saying that how he's losing his talent to the data center. They're building a data center 5 miles down the road from where his headquarters sits, and they're losing 6 to 8 folks with the same technical talent, and they're not going to get them back. And so they're really in a pinch because they're in a rural area, and it's hard to get talent to move to these places and stay there. And then you have a data center pick up, and then higher wages, long-term contracts, and overtime, all the things that go along with that. It's real, and it's happening, and it's going to continue to happen as data centers continue to sprawl throughout the country.
I was talking with somebody, same thing at Fiber Connect about that, and I'm like, well, is it just because the data centers have unlimited budgets and can pay people a lot more? And there's my understanding, it's not only that, but some people just would rather work in an air-conditioned data center than be out in the field digging a hole in a ditch, right?
I have heard they are like scrunched like sardines, though. Like, I mean, when you are working inside, you are shoulder to shoulder or on top of each other. Yeah. So there's that piece of it.
It's a little bit claustrophobic. My son works for the full disclosure, my son works for a Microsoft data center in Milwaukee, and he said that it's a little close in there some days.
Yeah. I mean, you have to keep in mind that, BEAD is one becoming smaller piece of the puzzle in terms of all of the money and the funding and the investment and the projects that are happening across the country, right? There's, it gets a lot of air because it was a huge program to start with, where obligations for funding are less than half of what the budgeted $42 billion, are. So we're not talking about, but the timing of it, right? You've got all of these projects that are going to be happening simultaneously in 50 states on top of all of the private equity investment and private investment and other builds that are happening, the data center builds and all of the other government funding programs that are continuing to deploy, whether it's RDOF or CPF. So there's just a whole lot of activity happening. And to Ashley's point, it is absolutely challenging on the construction side to be able to manage resources when you have rural areas that need construction, rural here, rural there, right? It's easier to kind of look regionally and send crews regionally and handle multiple projects rather than trying to do one here and one there, right? So there's a lot of challenges that aren't just because of a workforce shortage. There's other aspects and things that impact that.
It's really more about timing, isn't it? BEAD isn't
Mhm.
causing any of these challenges. It's BEAD is arriving when these challenges exist and exacerbating those challenges.
Precisely. Yeah.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about labor. What do we do about it? I'm assuming that we meaning the industry, meaning little rural ISPs, just can't go out and double wages. So what strategies are they employing to keep people in their shops versus losing them to Amazon or some big data center operator? Maybe they're not.
Well, that's what we were trying to figure out. I mean, I've heard of some folks who have tried to even get people offshore and bring them in on short-term contracts, which defeats the purpose of BEAD and trying to employ Americans. But when you've got people who are willing to work in this country, you can bring them on a visa. That's happening, and that is real. So that's one strategy to lock in some talent for 12 to 18 months. And but then again, you're investing the time and education into this talent that is short term, and then for them to turn over. But I think the cool thing is there's been so much development with virtual reality and training splicing, virtually for a lot of remote folks, and going into community colleges and technical schools and high schools and training talent and showing them what is possible. So I think that groundswell of education is going to help. How soon that's going to flourish is still to be determined, but there is a lot of activity and investment going into that so that these folks in rural areas could learn, fiber splicing using VR goggle, and so
Right.
That to me is just completely cool, innovating, and, really trying to find resources where you may not necessarily be able to every day.
I think we lost Lori there for a minute. Hopefully she's popping back in. Yes, I've seen a couple of demos of these virtual VR or enhanced, what do you call it? Enhanced reality, AR, whatever, where, learning to do these skills using, technology before you actually put them in front of a fiber splicer or something like that. That's just some really cool and innovative ways to, get at the same problem.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll wait for Lori. Lori will come back when she gets a chance and when she's able to connect. So Ashley, it's just you and me now.
Let's do it.
We're in trouble now. Another big potential gridlock maker on currently going on in the industry, which is related to BEAD somewhat, is permitting. Permitting delays can really cause delays in big projects. And what are you seeing in your industry and your clients? Are they wringing their hands about issues, et cetera?
Already. And I was just with my team earlier today with make ready costs and timelines with BABA compliant products for pole line hardware and things of that nature, and permitting, and they're having issues with electrical. And look, we knew this was going to happen to the extent that it's all happening now at once, because so many of these, the states have really are coming out of the gate at the same time. So that's a challenge. But the make ready and having to, combat with the electrical telco and just having to position themselves. I know when I built networks with Verizon, we struggled with this profusely. And a lot of times you end up going underground because of those challenges.
Yeah.
When you have a clock ticking and you've got that going against you, a lot of times you have to make that decision, which then ends up becoming more costly, usually going underground. And when you're in a buried environment, sometimes it's quicker from a speed to market standpoint, but then you have to look at your budget challenges. So those are things we're going to face. We knew we were going to face, but it's really coming to a head right away. So
just on a side note, do we have any idea what percentage of the fiber projects that were awarded in BEAD were planned to be underground versus aerial?
That is a very good question. I wonder that because, I remember when I was building networks, what the ratio was, and it absolutely flipped upside down and then ended up going buried, So I don't know what it is, but it'll be interesting. I have to find that one out.
I need to find somebody smarter than me to figure that out, just to satisfy my curiosity, and maybe for other reasons too. I don't know. There seems to always be a natural clash between a broadband provider and permitting organizations, whether it be the pole owner or the rights of way owner. for those underground projects that are happening too. That's not automatic, right? Communities, counties, local governing agencies are also limited in, they have their own labor shortages. And so they have to, it's sometimes nobody talks to each other like they should. Maybe they just talk past each other. And it's like, you're making my job harder. And the other person says, no, you're making my job harder. And when what they really need to do is figure out how they can each make each other's jobs easier.
Yeah. I think another one thing that you don't hear much about too is markouts and locating. Like that can be a big bottleneck, because I've experienced this too. Just, you have so many people coming out of the gate with their permits, and, the whole 811 call before you dig. And then there's not any additional resources added to this effort. And then that really can cause a bottleneck, because you can't trench or do anything until you have those. So that, again, is just to add on to the already existing problem. That's a big one that I've faced in the past. And it's hard unless you add resources, privately to fund those.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to move that along.
I did a podcast a couple of years ago about permitting crisis, or not permitting crisis, the locating crisis, because there were a lot of projects that were being held up by poorly skilled locators, or companies that were doing it and they were just doing a slipshod job of it. There's so many of these third-party companies that are hired to do locates that maybe aren't as motivated to do it well, or they can't pay their people well enough to motivate them to do it well. It's just a challenge. We're talking about permitting, of course, Lori, and some of the challenges that creates. Sorry, we lost you there for a minute, but
yeah, sorry about that. My internet, okay. I had to jump back on my phone. My home internet connection doesn't appear to be working well at the moment.
We won't throw them under the bus. We promise not to. They're probably not a CBAN member, though, so I'll just say that.
That's true.
That's one thing I'm proud of, is I get my internet from a CBAN member. So, we were talking about the how the permitting issues, the restrictions on pole attachments and make ready, and what's your perspective on that, Lori? Is that's a big issue, isn't it?
It is. I mean, permitting, we've been talking about it forever in this industry, right? I mean, we were talking about permitting challenges in 2010 when we were doing the BTOP, era. And recently, like last week or this week, the FCC has released a notice for proposed rulemaking on permitting that would impose a shot clock on state and local governments for processing permitting. And, I have not read the order yet, admittedly, but, it is something that I'm sure will be generating a lot of input and filings on. I mean, it's a little bit provocative, but at the same time, there's already a shot clock process in place on the wireless side, and it has been for some time, and that has worked quite well. And so, I think it's as an industry, we're past the time where there should be a standard regulatory process and a transparent one on the state and local, on federal, state, and local level for permitting. Period.
Totally agree.
It's going to be a clash, just because, as I mentioned to you before, Ashley, you've got local entities, those governing bodies that control the rights of way, are oftentimes overworked and understaffed, and they see the providers as antagonists, because they're making them work harder and faster than they really want to work in order to fulfill these permits, and if they have to operate under a shot clock, I think that's just going to make it more difficult. But the work needs to be done. I think we all just need to sing Kumbaya and pull up our big girl panties and get the work done. So,
amen.
That's what I'm hoping for. Let's talk a little bit about another potential part of this perfect storm, which is the fact that data centers want all the glass. They are the greediest people ever when it comes to fiber optics. And are you seeing that create challenges in the industry for not only BEAD projects, but for non-BEAD deployments that are happening?
Yeah. Go ahead, Ashley. You're closer to this.
Yeah, I'm seeing it globally, because BEAD is, in comparison to the demand for glass for data centers, BEAD is like a sliver of that. And unfortunately, the BEAD projects are getting the short end of that stick. But I mean, we've seen the announcements that Corning has made this week with Amazon, and with these endless budgets, it's tough to combat that or fight against it. But there's so much. Also, not only in the U.S., but in Asia Pac and the Middle East, even despite the war, there's still a great amount of demand there to build. And there's very few glass suppliers. And then when we get down to it, the elements that go into the glass, there is a global shortage for that, germanium. And that's, you can't just find that on any street corner either. So it really is an inherent organic problem that we're having in order to get that. But it is true. Like those with the highest demand are going to pay for it. And, I've been talking to multiple fiber suppliers throughout the world, and money is no issue when it comes to data centers. They just want the quantity. Sometimes they can't get the counts they want. It doesn't matter. It's just speed to market, and they're willing to pay almost anything to get it. So it's very challenging if you're below the data center market and trying to get that. And very few are going to invest in making those counts like 3456 or 6912. I mean, that's a massive undertaking to have that kind of manufacturing for that infrastructure. So it's very constrained, and like with BEAD topping and getting out at the same time, it's quite challenging for sure. But it's gonna be fun.
And I'll say that, for anyone out there who's starting or looking at a BEAD project, I mean, the strategy for deploying these projects that are on 4 years or less timeline for completion, you guys have to be really strategic about placing your orders quickly. It may be easier for you to manage working through distributors, working through logistics providers, to manage the inventory going forward rather than waiting for it to arrive. Because if you're not getting your orders in on now as early as possible, you may find that your project you're unable to meet your completion deadline.
Yeah. And I know, Curtis, there's just some of the fiber suppliers are looking for the project IDs. Like if you're a BEAD award recipient, they want to know the project ID. They want to know your build schedule. Like they want to make sure that fiber is very intentional and it's going to ASAP projects. So, hoarding happens all the time, but it's like, they want to know, okay, are these, P times
really
does that match the project? So they're being very, very prescriptive in how the deployment is going to shake out.
No more fiber hoarders.
No fiber.
There ought to be a show about that, a reality show. Are we going to see some of these projects get pushed to the very end of the BEAD window? What is it, 2029? I think the projects have to be completed.
2030. It's 4 years. It's 4 years from the date the contract is signed, right? The sub agreement. So we're still working through those.
Some into 31 by the time
those processes.
States get those. Yeah.
Possibly. Yeah. So you can deploy a network and build around your delivery schedule for materials, right? You can you can get conduit. You could start to put conduit in and then pull the fiber in after the fact. There's things that you can do to move your project forward while you're waiting on supplies. Now, and BEAD projects are going to have to look at this. They're going to have to look at mitigating their risks to meet that deployment timeline. And it'll be highly unlikely that there'll be any waivers given on deadlines until the very last minute, right? So we're not going to know until 2030 if projects are going to be delayed and if they're going to get waivers to completion. But anyone building out a BEAD project now has to look at all of these types of things at their disposal, putting in the orders early, managing the inventory, mitigating the risk by doing what you can up front, while you're waiting for fiber or while you're waiting for electronics or whatever it might be.
Yeah, the key takeaway here, BEAD operators, is don't wait. Do not drag your feet on this. If you're going to build this project, get started now, get the plan in place. Make sure you backdate everything so that you will have no problem meeting that deadline, and plan on delays and build those into your work plan. So
yeah, if you're waiting to put in an order, for example, for your ONTs or your, for some of your electronics, because normally that's what you do. You build the fiber first and then you're going to be, up again. Don't do that, right? You've got
Don't
to
do
think
that.
about these projects in a different way.
Yeah, just-in-time fulfillment's not going to be a strategy to use.
Correct.
In this process. Well, talking about electronics, Lori, is that going to be a big challenge? It doesn't seem like that's nearly going to be as big a challenge as some of these other materials like fiber or even conduit, because I know there's some shortages in the materials used to create conduit too.
Yeah, no, right. I mean, and you have some petroleum, right? That's at least oil-based in some of the oil-based products and materials. On the electronics side, right? I mean, the BABA supply chain for electronics has not been tested like the fiber supply chain has for BABA. And so, manufacturers are working now to meet the demand and scale. So, at the moment, the issue is not it's not the same, right, as the crunch on the fiber side. So
yeah, it's not being caused by the same factors by any means.
It's different.
That's more of a BABA thing, isn't it?
The pressure on the fiber is also BABA related, but
Sure.
Hyperscalers aren't buying CPE equipment, right? They're not buying, OLTs and ONTs and subscriber facing electronics.
And they don't care
right?
about
So
BABA, do they?
No.
The hyperscalers don't care where the fiber
Well,
is.
some do, actually, but there's kind of the FCC there's a lot of activity around U.S. manufacturing.
Yeah.
And so, what I'm hearing, at least in the market, is that the pressure is being put on the BABA glass. And so that is being utilized by everybody in the industry,
Gotcha.
hyperscalers, data centers, and, the government funding programs.
Got it. I suppose if you're a manufacturer, your safest bet is to do BABA compliant everything, because, you're gonna need it. You're gonna need it for any BEAD projects, and it,
And beyond.
may raise your costs, but of course those costs are going to be passed along to, guess what, the people building it, and eventually to the customers they're connecting. So unfortunately, that's the challenge of a country that, like in our case in the US, has outsourced much of its manufacturing over the past 50 years, and now we wish we hadn't as much as we had. So that's a completely different topic. Let's talk a little bit about other things that are impacting the timelines for BEAD projects and non-BEAD projects. We talked about labor, we talked about fiber and glass, electronics, permitting. Are there other factors out there that you think are kind of putting pressure on these projects?
Well, there's a number of, we've been hearing stories from states, right? I think in Texas, there were four providers that dropped out, withdrew their BEAD from BEAD. And so in Nebraska, I know has reopened their grant window to fill in the gaps for some missed locations as well. And I think you're going to see more and more of that as this program goes on. We haven't talked about LEO, and Amazon is behind schedule with their satellite launches, and so there's a lot of pressure kind of being put on the BEAD environment by a number of factors and across the different technologies.
Yeah, I'm a big space fan, so I of course watch rocket launches, and seeing that poor Amazon rocket exploded, I just went, oh boy, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. That was a big setback for them, and I'm sure that they'll have to recover from it. Ashley, anything else on that you can add to it?
Yeah, I think there's been so much talk. I have to say, from a fiber standpoint, when some of these projects are being declined, or Kuiper, others saying they can't meet the speed requirements, inside of me it kind of makes a little smile, because I do truly believe that fiber is the solution for long-term connectivity. And so I'm hoping that maybe this tilts the access back towards fiber, and they can build it right the first time, because I do believe that if they do a short-term fixed wireless or with satellite, that eventually there's going to need to be fiber. I mean, that is the solution. And so I'm just seeing some of the, I I said this a year or two ago too, like in terms of those who are getting the awards, and there's going to be a lot of churn with providers, whether defaults or all that. I mean, it's what is today will not look like that tomorrow. So just, cautiously optimistic that more will index towards fiber and get that longer term solution.
So is BEAD going to become just another 4-letter acronym like RDOF was?
There's a risk. I mean, BEAD is already its own 4-letter acronym for, 4-letter word for all of the things that have led to this point. So it is a complicated program, and it continues to be complicated.
As an organization, CBAN, of course, has been involved in a lot of digital equity work. And as I've said multiple occasions, and people kind of groan when I say it, but without equity, BEAD is just bad. There, I did it again. So one thing, I come back to something you said, Lori, quick. You mentioned Nebraska's doing kind of a supplemental round. Did they have to get NTIA approval to do that?
I believe so. I'm sure they did. It was, I can't recall the article, but I would imagine so. I mean, we're still waiting on the non-deployment fund guidance to come out from NTIA. As a reminder, it was supposed to be in the middle of March, and here we are in the middle of June. My understanding is that one of the things that is being considered for non-deployment is a cleanup round for BEAD, right?
Yeah.
So, there's two parts of that. The first is cleaning up locations that were missed the first time in BEAD, and the second thing is cleaning up locations that are abandoned by BEAD project awardees that turned down the award.
And there's going to be a few in each of that category for sure. Absolutely. Well, I think we've done a pretty good job of touching on many of these topics. I think we could probably talk for hours about this, and in fact, I'm sure many of you are talking about this for hours and hours, and each of you in your positions. Ashley, you at KGPCo, and Lori at Nokia, thank you for coming on and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Curtis. Yeah, absolutely.
Appreciate your time today, and thank you all for watching or listening. Make sure you subscribe or like if you enjoyed this. Yeah, even if you didn't enjoy it, please press subscribe and like, and we'll see you all back here next time on Broadband Action.